With work finally wrapped up on my next book on free-to-play and mobile design, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the findings that I had with it. And for today's critical thought, we're going to discuss 10 very unique and different mobile games that if you don't really follow the mark or you're predominantly a console or PC gamer, you may not realize what is out there right now. When it comes to grading the mobile games we're going to talk about in the video today, we're going to be categorizing them into casual, core, and hardcore in terms of the interaction or the level of investment you're going to need in order to play them. So casual games are those that are very simplistic in terms of their core gameplay loop. Will typically be a lot about idle play, and you can probably get through their entire daily loop within 30 to 40 minutes, I would say, no more nor less each day. They're really great to kind of hop on, make a little bit of progress, and then go do something else. Core games are those that have a bit more in terms of player interaction and player mastery of the systems involved. This is where a lot of the RPG style games will tend to fall on. And these games, while they may or may not have autoplay, you still need to have somewhat of a direct intervention if you want to have a chance of winning. And their daily loops are probably 40 minutes to an hour, again, give or take based on the examples. And then finally, the hardcore games, these are the big ones. These are titles that there is no autoplay, that you are getting a game that you are going to have to play each level, do each map in order to figure things out. They are probably the most in terms of gameplay out of the free-to-play and mobile space in this particular aspect. And for these titles, outside of any kind of like energy requirements, you can play them for a very long time. Now, with regards to the free-to-play nature of them, that I'm going to be talking about on a game-by-game basis. So, let's start with the casual offerings. The first one that I played was Figure Fantasy. This is essentially, what if we replaced Toy Story with basically Japanese anime figurines? Where it's not so much about trying to find oneself and hokey songs, but I believe the toys are like fighting for either like world domination or toy domination. There's a lot of story that I kind of glossed over while playing it. When it comes to aesthetics, it is one of the better examples of games that I've seen from the mobile space in some time, with everything looking like, well, an actual figurine that could exist. And there have been rumors that the developer was bought or has major investment in a company that may in fact make these figurines into actual figures, which that would certainly be interesting. In terms of the gameplay loop, it is about finding and collecting different figurines. Each one belongs to a different faction and different style of play. And of course, building your own perfect team to go out, complete quests, get more gear and loot, and roll more gachas. Now, of the games that I'm talking about for today, it is the most newest in terms of when it came out. I believe it came out late 2021. So it really hasn't had a lot of time to kind of get into the groove of new content. I believe at the time I'm recording this video, there's only been 2, maybe 3 different new characters introduced to the game. Of the games I'm going to be talking about for today, it is definitely one of the more idle-friendly ones. It is essentially an idle RPG. You'll collect resources when you're not playing, and it is very much one of those games that you load up, play 15-20 minutes, you're done. You can go do something else and come back the next day. My big problem with this game is the idle nature of it. You see, progress is limited based on the max level of your 5 highest level characters. So if you don't get 5 characters high enough in level, you can't really do anything else in this game. And that means you are going to have to rely on the gacha system and the loot boxes, or just the gacha banners, to have any real chance of progressing. And the game is very generous in terms of its gacha currency because of that. But again, if you're looking for something meatier in terms of team development and general gameplay, this one will probably not be for you. So the next game is one that's a bit on the older side, and that is Princess Connect Redive. This is one that I played last year, and I kind of got tired of it for a reason that will come up in the next few minutes. But if you're looking for one of the more longer lasting or longer developed idle style games, this is another really big heavyweight. It's had years of updates and they're being brought to the global server. It is another idle style game. You put together your party of different characters, they do their own thing. Now, what's interesting about Princess Connect from kind of a progression point of view is that energy is going to be your real limiter. Because in order to level up characters, you need to farm randomly droppable pieces of gear, which you then craft into their respective armor and weapons. And this takes a lot of grinding. Not only that, but you also need to get more shards, upgrade characters like that. And it is one of those games where you're going to be doing a whole mess of grinding. Because, again, of how hands-off it is in terms of its general gameplay. It has decent graphics, really nice effects. My big problem with it is how it handles its gacha systems. It is on the stingier side in terms of its gacha, and not only that, but the game has a lot of its characters locked behind limited seasonal banners. So if you really want a character who's only available during the summer season and you don't get them, well, you'll have to come back in 1 year, and hopefully you'll have enough luck and money and resources built up for it. And I just found that to be very restrictive, and it kind of caused me to just fall out of love with it, and I haven't played it since. The next one on my list is one that has certainly exploded in popularity over the last year, and that is Cookie Run Kingdom. When it comes to, again, to aesthetics, this is a really great one with just some very bright animated characters and cookie designs. The game itself is kind of a mashup of an idle RPG-like figure fantasy with the kind of kingdom or city construction of something like Farmville and all those games. Now, what's interesting about this one is that it's the actual kingdom building that gets kind of put on center stage. You can only level up your characters based on what your overall kingdom level is. So you're going to be really spending the bulk of your time focusing on building your lovely little cookie kingdom, and not so much on the party dynamics, which is kind of unusual for the genre. The story is on the interesting side, and despite the beautiful and colorful cartoony graphics, they talk about war and killing different cookie kinds and a lot of very weird stuff, and the fact that this happens after possibly a post-apocalypse. One of the cookies, basically all she talks about is freezing the world to never-ending snow. It's basically evil Elsa in cookie form. In terms of the gacha, it is somewhat generous. They do give you lots of gems, which are the game's premium currency. There are ways of acquiring free rolls, but the game is definitely very monetization focused. This is one of those titles where anytime you do something good, the game is going to pop up with a limited time offer. And it will assault you with, spend $9.99 here, spend $24.99 there. It's only available for 8 more hours. You gotta do it now. My big problem I have with Cookie Run Kingdom is that I really wanted to focus more on the party-based dynamics and making progress like that. And it is, again, one of those games where you have to kind of babysit the kingdom a lot. And this game will send you out a lot of notifications when things are done. Of the 3 games in my kind of casual group for this video, it technically has the most actual gameplay of the 3. But if you don't like that kind of design or focusing on the management side, then this game is probably not going to do it for you. So with that said, let's move on to the core games on my list, and we have 3 to look at. And we're going to start with one that is probably the most recognizable, and that is Azure Lane, aka World War II Ship Girl Simulator. So this game, of the 3 on the list here for core, is the oldest. And it does kind of show with the UI being a bit dated in terms of its quality of life features. But this is a game where you collect ship girls and you reenact World War II battles. And of course, there are lots and lots and lots of characters to collect. The big focus on this one is collecting gear and putting together groups of 6 ships into your various fleets. And there's certainly a lot to keep track of between the various factions, gear types, and the game could honestly do a better job on that front. Of the games that I'm talking about today, this is perhaps the most generous in terms of gacha currency. The game has introduced 4 ultra rare ships over the last, I think, 2 years, and I own 2 of the 4. Just the only reason I own the other 2 was I wasn't playing when they were available. It is a game that if you just play it for like 40 minutes to an hour each day, you'll probably get enough gacha currency as a free player to get most of the ships that you want. It is still very much on the grindy side, especially if you're trying to get some of the higher rated characters and completing some of the challenges along those lines, especially if you're trying to farm for specific ships or gear. They did introduce kind of a late game story mode in the form of Operation Siren. That mode is completely, resource free to play, and it does add more to the story of the game, which is nice. The bulk of the monetization is focused on quality of life, specifically in improving the amount of ships you can have, stored at one time, and the bevy of cosmetics that I can't show you here. And of these games, or at least of the core group, it is very different in terms of its gameplay, and that's what we're kind of seeing as we get into more of the 2nd and 3rd generation style mobile games, is trying to separate and distinguish themselves from the other titles. It is a game that, if you don't mind, again, the aesthetics and the general hands-on, hands-off nature of it, I would say give this one a try. Again, if you're someone who doesn't want to spend a lot of money but still get that gacha experience, it's probably the best one of its kind or of this style to check out. The second game that I want to talk about here is one that was suggested to me by Pony on Discord here, and that is World Flipper. When we talk about kind of the growth of the 2nd and 3rd generation of mobile gameplay, it is definitely in trying to do something different with these designs, and World Flipper definitely falls into that group. This is a pinball RPG gacha, where the various characters in your party turn into your quote-unquote ball. They'll use the flippers to send enemies, charge up specials, and has a really great pixel aesthetic to it. In terms of its gacha, it did seem like it was going to be a little bit tougher compared to some of the other games to get the currencies, but I didn't really spend as much time on this one compared to some of the other games on this list. The problem for me is that if you're looking for a pinball game first, gacha game second, World Flipper isn't really that. This is not a game where mastery of pinball physics and, if you've played the Pinball Arcade or Pinball FX, is really going to help you. At the end of the day, if you have really highly rated characters or the highest rated, you can just mash those flippers and you'll just win by sheer power alone. But again, if you are looking for a very different take on mobile and gacha design, then definitely check out World Flipper. So the final game on the list is one that I believe is the most recent in terms of its release, and that is Revived Witch. This is a party-based RPG gacha with, quite frankly, some of the most beautiful 16-bit pixel art I've seen in mobile, and probably in a lot of games as well. So this one is kind of very light puzzle solving and adventure, and more focused on RPG battles. And you have parties that are made up of 2 groups of 3 characters. When someone gets knocked out, the reserve party moves into that space. So the general gameplay of this one is built on figuring out what combinations of the various classes you want to put into your party. You have tanks, supports, buffers, debuffers, etc., and how you want to arrange them on the field. This one is heavy when it comes to grinding. You have to not only grind the various upgrade material for your characters, you need to grind experience, gear, the different skills, not to mention a lot of daily play as well. Now, a lot of it is, again, on the idle side. Once you've set up your party, you can kind of go onto autoplay, and the game will do a really good job on its own of doing it all for you. My problem with this one is I felt that 3 party members was just too small for a gacha driven game. Usually we see parties of 4, 5, and maybe 6 characters. I just always felt that with the party combinations I wanted to make, I was just one off for making something that I thought would be really cool. Now, of the games on this list, it does have a very interesting story in terms of how things play out. It's, again, very much RPG, JRPG style, that kind of thing. So it may be worth it to go through it at least one time to just see all that. And it is on the, I would say, somewhat friendlier side in terms of its gacha. Again, because it is built on the different classes and party formations, you're not as much beholden to getting, or beheld to getting that one perfect UR character and then everything is beautiful. So I would definitely give this one a recommendation if you like RPG based designs. So with that, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk about the hardcore games, because these are the meatiest of the experiences. But before we do that, if you're interested in more of my thoughts on design, then check out the following books. For entry-level students, we have 20 Essential Games to Study, and then the Game Design Deep Dive series that takes an extensive look at different genres, with free-to-play coming in 2022. When it comes to talking about the hardcore group, this is the group of games that really represent the idea of a third generation of mobile. They are each unique individual games that they really don't have any direct competition in the mobile space. They're also the most hands-on in terms of their gameplay. And these are titles that you could play them for as long as you want, of course provided with the resources and things that go into them. And they are still, again, built on very involved monetization systems. So to start with, we have Punishing Gray Raven. This is a game that is essentially an action RPG style title for mobile. Essentially, this market has been cornered by Punishing Gray Raven and Genshin Impact, at least in the global space. There are other ones being developed. I believe they're still region locked. But this is a game that is less about proper stats and more about how well you are at timing dodges and matching various powers as you're fighting enemies. The combat system is very different compared to a lot of the other kind of action-style games we see from Western developers. Because of the focus on action-based gameplay, the RPG and gacha progression, while it is important, it's not as do or die. As long as you get 3 characters that are really or work really well together and you know how to use their specific abilities, you can get really far into this game. Similar to the next game on this list, is also really interesting in terms of the story. Very much like a post-apocalyptic trying to rebuild the world kind of thing. And there's multiple events. They do a lot of stuff in terms of giving you monthly or every 2 months worth of like a major story chapter to go through. The problem that this game had is that despite having at least 2 years, I believe, planned of content and updates, it was launched very content dry. For a lot of people, including myself, we got really tired of the daily loop because it is all action driven. They basically didn't let you get the option to automate it. So you would just have to repeat the same 2 minutes of exact gameplay of fighting these enemies again and again to grind things out. I believe they may have fixed that in a later version. But it is a game that the focus on action means that if you're not really into that kind of gameplay, you don't like playing action games on your phone, obviously this game is not going to do it for you. And for the people who did play it, it did get very repetitive. Again, because of the fact that the gacha and kind of RPG side aren't as involved compared to the action gameplay. But I'm hoping the improvements they've made on it, and the very fact that, again, it is more skill-based to some extent than some of the other mobile free-to-play games out there, does put in that rare category along with Honkai, if you're looking for that style of game. Now, the next one is another one that has grown in big or a massive popularity, and that is Arknights. So this is Tower Defense Gacha, with each character being represented, or each tower being represented by a character. Characters come in rarities of 1 to 6 stars. So the gacha system in this one is probably, of the games in this hardcore, I would say probably like the most pronounced in terms of how it gates progression. You see, as you go up in rarity, towers have different classes or different functionality. You have ones that are built for tanking, range, magic, or in this game is called arts. When you get to the 5 and 6 stars, they start to have unique abilities or role-breaking abilities, such as a tank that can also all of a sudden do a lot of heavy damage, or a ranged character who can also debuff, and so on and so forth. Because of that utility, it is very stingy in terms of its gacha currency, especially if I compare it to games like Azure Lane and Figure Fantasy. But if you like tower defense style games, this is definitely one of the more interesting ones, both on the mobile side and on PC. You can't really automate in this one until you've gotten one perfectly successful map done, and that will take you figuring out how to best use your characters and how it works on the maps themselves. They have lots of stories, an entire base subsystem that you can use for crafting, and there are a lot of different progression chains and bonus things you can do in this game. The problem again lies with its gacha. Because of how important the towers are, it really does affect your progression in terms of the luck that you have. And developers have a bevy of monetization purchases to get you more currencies, free rolls, and things like that. So this is definitely a whale-friendly game in that respect. And the problem when it comes to progression is that because of that class focus, while you can certainly punch up with lower rated characters, you're eventually going to hit that wall where the stats are too high, the enemies are too numerous, that you need the advantages that the 5 and 6 star characters bring if you want to stand a suitable chance, or spend hours upon hours of farming maps for the resources that you need. And unfortunately, that does kind of hurt it. It is very much that a gacha-driven game first, tower defense game driven second. If you are looking for a very different mobile game and you do like tower defense style gameplay, definitely recommend you at least check it out, even just to study its systems and design. So, with that said, the next one is Alchemy Stars. This, I believe, would be the newest of the 4 games in this category. And this game, if Arknights is tower defense gacha, Alchemy Stars is grindstone gacha. If you remember that game from Apple Arcade, where you'll move characters around and whatever titles you have them run on will dictate what attacks get done, what special abilities, and so on. It has a lot of different events to it, and kind of the depth of the party building is figuring out what combination of elements you want to bring together. When you get to the higher rarity units, they may have kind of cross synergy, such as fire and lightning, force and water, and things along those lines. There's a lot of things to do in this game. They run lots of events. I think they just did a collaboration. My big problem with this one, what is kind of a deal breaker for me, is that I just don't like this gameplay. I wasn't a huge fan of the kind of grindstone puzzle action style gameplay, and the tower defense of Arknights is probably more suited to my particular preference. But if you did enjoy grindstone and looking for a very new gacha mobile take on that, I would say give this one a check. It can be a bit stingy on its gacha currencies, similar to Arknights, and just to keep that in mind. So, the final game on this list is one that you probably know what it's going to be by now, and that is Genshin Impact. Genshin Impact is essentially Breath of the Wild gacha. Of mobile style games, it is perhaps the largest in terms of the amount of content and game space. I mean, they basically give you an entire open world to explore, complete with puzzles and quests and daily content, and so on and so forth. Like Arknights, a lot of the gachas focus on acquiring new characters. Every character belongs to a different element. uses a different style of weapon, and they will often have different ways of interacting with the world itself. So it's not just about, again, collecting really good characters, but building parties that will synergize in terms of elemental combinations, getting through the various puzzles. It has a complete story. It's been expanded many times already, and they just released another one right now. And again, when it comes to the mobile space in particular, this is easily like the biggest actual game of that design. With that said, however, it is, of this list, I think quite possibly the most stingiest when it comes to gacha. For those of you who don't know, it features a very, very low rate of getting a 5-star, which is their highest class, of yes, that's 0.6%. There are people, and I've watched YouTubers and streamers who record their gacha openings, who have spent several $1,000s just to get their hands on one character. And if you're a free player, you can make a lot of progress just in the game alone, but it's still filtered through the gacha. So what that means is that you're going to still have to do daily loop play and grind resources, and hopefully you'll get lucky. But you should be able to make a lot of progress just with the characters you get from the main game. So similar to some extent to something like Warframe and Path of Exile, if you want to play Genshin Impact for free, you'll get an entirely story-driven open world game for you to explore. But unlike those two, there is a greater focus on that gacha and getting you to spend money. But if you do enjoy Breath of the Wild, and hopefully you can resist, throwing your credit card at them, there really is no other game at this level of scope and scale on the mobile scene. So, with that said, let me know what you think in the comments down below. If there's any other interesting, unique, or different third-generation mobile games for me to check out. Be sure to visit our Discord and check out our Patreon link down below, and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games.